Before he ever sang a single note on a stage, Peabo Bryson already knew what it meant to fight for something worth having. Imagine building a life from nothing, growing up on a small farm in South Carolina, losing almost everything you ever earned, then rebuilding it all with nothing but your voice and your will. Now imagine leaving this world at 75 years old, with a devoted family by your side, a legacy that stretches across more than 5 decades of music, and a fortune that tells a story far more powerful than the number itself. This is that story. Robert Peabo Bryson was born on April 13, 1951, in Greenville, South Carolina, in a time and place where the road ahead was never guaranteed for a young black man with a dream. He spent much of his childhood on his grandfather's modest farm in the small town of Malden, South Carolina, a world away from the bright studio lights that would one day define his life. His father, Telford Copeland, was largely absent from the picture, which meant that the women in his life, his mother Marie, and his grandparents, became the pillars that held him steady. It was his mother who first exposed him to the power of music, taking him to concerts where giants like Sam Cooke and Little Richard filled the air with something electric and alive. By the time young Robert was 5 or 6 years old, he could already sing along word for word. Music wasn't just something he enjoyed, it was something he was. At 12 years old, he won a local talent contest. 2 years later, at just 14, he was already singing backup for a Greenville band called Al Freeman and the Upsetters. It was Freeman who had trouble pronouncing his middle name, Peabo, a name of French West Indian origin, and so the world came to know him simply as Peabo. That nickname would follow him everywhere, all the way to the Grammy stage and beyond. By his mid-teens, Bryson had left home to tour with Moses Dillard and the Textown Display, grinding through the circuit that seasoned so many soul artists of that era. It was during a recording session at Atlanta's Bang Records that fate finally gave him the opening he deserved. The label's general manager, Eddie Biscoe, heard something in the young backup singer that others had overlooked, a voice that could carry not just a melody, but an emotion. Biscoe signed him as a writer, producer, and arranger, and encouraged him to step out front and perform his own songs. By 1976, Bryson had released his self-titled debut album on the Bang label, earning a respectable following on the regional soul charts. The following year, he signed with Capitol Records and dropped Reaching for the Sky and Crosswinds, both of which were certified gold by the Recording Industry Association of America. These weren't just albums. They were declarations. Peabo Bryson had arrived. What followed over the next 2 decades was nothing short of extraordinary. He released duet albums with Natalie Cole and the legendary Roberta Flack, whose collaboration produced one of the most iconic romantic ballads in R&B history. Tonight I Celebrate My Love, which climbed to number 4 on Billboard's Adult Contemporary chart in 1983. In 1984, he delivered another solo masterpiece with If Ever You're in My Arms Again, a song that reached number 1 on the Adult Contemporary chart and cemented his identity as the voice of love. Across a recording career that spanned more than 5 decades, Bryson released 19 studio albums, including his final project, Grace, which arrived in 2026, the very year he passed. If Peabo Bryson's career had ended before the early 1990s, he would still be remembered as one of R&B's most gifted voices. But then came Disney, and everything changed. In 1992, Bryson lent his voice to 2 animated films that would become cultural touchstones for an entire generation, and for many generations still to come. First came Beauty and the Beast, the golden-hued ballad he recorded alongside the incomparable Celine Dion. Their voices together were nothing short of magical, warm, sweeping, and impossibly tender. The song earned Grammy nominations for Record of the Year and Song of the Year, and ultimately won the Grammy Award for Best Pop Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocals. It also won the Academy Award and Golden Globe for Best Original Song, though those honors went to the songwriters, composer Alan Menken and lyricist Howard Ashman. Then came A Whole New World, recorded with singer Regina Belle for Disney's Aladdin. That song did something that very few recordings in pop history have ever accomplished. It knocked Whitney Houston's "I Will Always Love You" off the top of the Billboard Hot 100 after a 14-week run. It became the first song from an animated feature film to ever reach #1 on that chart. Bryson and Bell won the Grammy Award for Best Pop Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocals the following year, making Bryson a two-time Grammy winner. He had not only crossed over into the mainstream, he had made history. But life, as Bryson well knew, does not always sing the melody you rehearse. Beneath the Grammy wins and the chart-topping magic, there was real financial pain building in the background. By 2003, the United States Internal Revenue Service had come knocking. Bryson reportedly owed more than $1.2 million in back taxes dating all the way back to 1984. The IRS seized property from his Atlanta home and auctioned it off to settle the debt. Among the items taken were his grand piano, hundreds of pairs of shoes, a key to the city of Miami, and both of his Grammy Awards. Those Grammy trophies being sold off at auction was a moment that broke the hearts of music fans everywhere. But in one of the most touching details of his story, close friends and family members bid on the awards and won them back, returning them to Bryson as a gesture of love and loyalty that money genuinely cannot buy. The man who had given the world so much beauty and song had people around him who refused to let his legacy be stripped away. That said something profound not just about his music, but about the kind of man he was. Then, in April of 2019, Bryson suffered a heart attack that shook his family and fans to their core. He was rushed to an Atlanta hospital and placed in stable condition. But true to the spirit that had carried him from a South Carolina farm to the top of the music world, he made a full recovery. He later said with characteristic warmth that he had been on the other side long enough to make friends. That was Peabo Bryson. Even in the face of death, he found a reason to smile. In 2010, after several earlier engagements that never quite made it to the altar, Bryson married Tanya Boniface, a British singer and former member of the English R&B group The 411. Their love story was quiet and steady, the kind that doesn't make tabloid headlines but runs deep beneath the surface. On New Year's Eve of 2017, they welcomed a son named Robert, affectionately known as Kit. The arrival of Kit at the age of 66 gave Bryson a renewed sense of purpose and joy that was visible to everyone around him. In later years, young Kit would occasionally join his father on stage, standing beside a man whose voice had shaped the romantic soundtrack of millions of lives. Bryson also had a daughter named Linda from an earlier relationship, as well as 3 grandchildren who knew their grandfather as something far more than a music legend. He was a presence, a warmth, a story told in song. And though his net worth at the time of his passing was reported at $2.5 million, a figure significantly humbled by decades of financial hardship and the IRS settlement, the wealth he left behind in memories, music, and love was immeasurable by any calculator. On May 31, 2026, CBS News reported that Peabo Bryson had suffered a stroke. The music world held its breath. 2 days later, on June 2, 2026, surrounded by his family at a hospital in Marietta, Georgia, Robert Peabo Bryson took his final breath. He was 75 years old. The tributes poured in from every corner of the music world. Fellow artists, fans who had danced at their weddings to "Tonight I Celebrate My Love," and children who had grown up believing in magic partly because of A Whole New World. All of them mourned not just the voice, but the man. His final album, Grace, released earlier that year, felt in retrospect like a farewell gift, a last offering from a man who had spent his entire life giving his best to anyone who would listen. The fortune Peabo Bryson left behind was never purely financial. Yes, there was his Atlanta home, his catalog of recordings, his royalties tied to 2 of the most beloved Disney songs ever created. But the true fortune, the one that brought his wife Tanya, his son Kit, his daughter Linda, and his 3 grandchildren to tears, was the legacy of a man who never stopped believing in love as a force worth singing about. He was a man who started with nothing, built something magnificent, lost pieces of it along the way, and rebuilt with grace and dignity. He was a man who had his Grammy Awards physically taken from him and then returned by the hands of people who loved him. He was a man who suffered a heart attack in his late 60s, recovered, and then released 2 more albums. He was a man who became a father again at 66 and found in that baby boy a reason to keep standing. The tears his family cried were not just tears of sadness. They were tears of awe, the kind you cry when you realize the full scope of what one human being managed to do with the one life they were given. Peabo Bryson's fortune was not simply measured in dollars. It was measured in every couple who fell in love to the sound of his voice, every child who believed in magic because of his words, and every musician who came after him knowing that a boy from a farm in South Carolina could, if he believed hard enough, truly reach for the sky. Rest in power, Peabo Bryson. The voice of love will never go silent.